they'll probably be pushing towards one of those winter meetings types deals where if they, kind of get what they want and get the big press conference at the winter meetings.
Welcome into Northside Territory, Foul Territory Network's Cubs podcast. I'm Sahadev Sharma with my partner, Patrick Mooney. We're your Cubs beat writers for The Athletic. Patrick, a crazy Halloween for the Cubs as they hire a third base coach. The exciting start to a frenzied offseason. No, it really, Craig Counsell is starting to shape his staff. We've talked about this a bit, how it was kind of a rushed process. I know he liked to take his time. He's a methodical person when it comes to these things, and did try and take his time last year, but it wasn't an ideal timing for him to really look at every candidate. And this time around, he's taken someone from Milwaukee. I don't believe their new third base coach, Quintin Berry, was ever actually a coach under Craig Counsell. Am I remembering that correctly? He was actually last year he was just in the minor leagues until last year. Is that accurate?
No, he was a coach.
Okay, he was. What?
Prior to that, he was a minor league coordinator with the Brewers, and then got promoted to the big league staff. And so he's had like 4 years of major league coaching experience on a really good team.
Okay. I don't know why
Thank you for reading our story.
That's why. What did I see? Oh, maybe I forgot what year it was. On October. Oh, okay. That's what I read wrong. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Doing good work here, kicking it off well. But what I do know is that Barry is exceptional when it comes to his coaching for base running, and that is an area where the advanced stats actually liked the Cubs on base running, but
that's because they never watched the Cubs.
Yeah, the coaching staff disagreed. The front office disagrees. When it comes to the base running metric on Fangraphs, the Cubs were fifth. But you know who was far and away first was the Milwaukee Brewers.
Okay.
They were the number one team in base running, according to this stat. I think where the Cubs probably get a lot of bonus points is because they were good at base stealing. But base running, there were a lot of mistakes. And it was something the coaches noticed. It was something Craig Counsell noticed. And it's something the front office wanted to address. And I think Barry is the first step in that.
No doubt. And it was funny tweeting out our story and seeing just some of the anger. Well, I guess there's always anger on Twitter, but just the rage that is still out there towards Craig Counsell's decision to leave Milwaukee. I think it's a good hire. I think it's a good opportunity for Barry as well. Someone who presumably has designs on maybe bigger roles in baseball. Like, wouldn't rule out being on a potential manager track. I mean, this is someone who played for Tony Gwynn at San Diego State, who carved out a major league playing career, put himself on a very fast track on the coaching side. And look, this is a guy who was trusted by teams who wanted to win the World Series. Like, he was on this sort of cycle of minor league deals where he'd hop from one team to another in case they had a Dave Roberts moment. Guy who could pinch run and steal a base. And that takes a lot of nerve, a lot of instincts, as well as some technical skills that he can impart to the Cubs. And nice sounding board for Counsell, and a guy who played very recently too, and has gotten a lot of hands-on experience for a team that, look, we've seen it for years now, that does the little things really well and frustrated the Cubs to no end.
Yeah, my understanding is that Counsell thinks very highly of him, even though My brain thought he was in the minor leagues for some reason. I did. I have.
Too much Halloween candy. We know you're just binging. Your brain's off.
But I remember last offseason having some people suggest him as a potential bench coach. I couldn't confirm whether he was ever interviewed or not, but that those suggestions came because people were like, Counsell's a fan. Counsell likes the way he works. Counsell had a lot of praise for Ryan Flaherty as bench coach as well. So, I mean, these you have to appreciate that he's, listen, coaching only can impact the game so much, right? It's about the players in the end, right? I like to think like when people want to point to the hitting coach, oh no, what's wrong with their offense? Fire the hitting coach. I like to point to the players and say like that's the problem. Okay. Like very rarely is it the hitting coach's fault. Very rarely is it the coach's fault. But when you have impactful coaches, it's one of those, small things that can go unnoticed. That can be the difference in a win or a loss. I mean, we don't need to go much further than looking at the last 5 games of baseball that were just played.
Yeah.
Those stats are jarring when you look at what happened in the World Series and the stats you'd normally look at, right? Just like offense, pitch ERA, batting average, RBI, whatever. Like all those things, the Yankees did better. You know what they were terrible at? Base running and defense.
And defense,
right?
For sure, yeah.
Yeah. So the Cubs the Cubs have a solid defense, and it probably can get tightened up in spots, but very, very, very good defense, above average defense. If Berry's impactful in this area, I think that's important. And I think Counsell recognizes that. He's looking for any advantage he can find. And maybe that's the difference in adding a win or two over the course of 162 games. I don't want to put it all on a coach, but you have the right people in place. You can get an edge here or there. I think that's what when we're talking about how like the marginal difference, like what did we talk about so much during the season? Like they have no margin for error. They can't make these mistakes. They can't do these things. They're not good enough, right? And maybe they like ideally they get to a point where you're not playing within the margins like that and desperate for an extra win or two, but this helps, right? In theory, this should help them.
Yeah, it'll be a problem. Like this is a perfectly fine conversation leading into the GM meetings. If we're like weeks out after the winter meeting, it's like, well, they signed
Quintin Berry.
Brewers. Which kind of was last winter, right? And just, they got Counsell and no other new players. But no, I think that's a good thought to kind of wrap up this segment and look ahead to the GM meetings and sort of a who stays and who goes portion of the offseason.
All right, Patrick, let's take a little look at the Cubs roster. The coaches, like we said, can't be the biggest difference makers on the team. It's about the players. And yes, free agency, trades, all that stuff. Listen, though that's got to be where the differences are made, right? Like that's where the fans care most about. That's where, frankly, you and I probably care most about. Like it's the most interesting thing that can happen this offseason. But we're working on a piece for next week that'll kind of set up the offseason. And one of the topics is the arbitration non-tender decisions. And listen, this stuff, it can become minutia at a certain point. I think it's kind of fascinating because there are some interesting, at minimum, names that they have decisions on. I mean, the list is 15 players deep but some of them are obvious. Like, are they going to tender Colton Brewer? Probably not, right? Like, I don't think that's a real hard decision. Are they going to tender Justin Steele? Yeah, they're going to tender Justin Steele. There's obvious ones, but I think there are some interesting ones. I mean, there's this middle tier of like Wisdom, Talkman, Edward Alzolay, Nick Madrigal. What do you do with Julian Merriweather? Is that worth a $1.3 million risk? This is the estimation, I believe, from MLB Trade Rumors of their
Correct.
ARB price, right? I think those names that I mentioned are kind of interesting. I'm curious what you think. Like, are there any obvious names that I just mentioned there that stand out to you that you're like, yeah, that guy's being tendered. I don't know why you're debating him, or I think that they have a decision to make there.
Yeah, I'm with you on that sort of middle tier. And if you break it out into position players, like Christian Bethancourt did a nice job. But if it's 2.5 million and you need to upgrade at catching and you're keeping Miguel Amaya, I don't know if they bring him back. Talkman and Wisdom, I think, are nice role players. I think it's just that balance of like, when are you going to give Owen Casey some run? Like, is Nico Horner going to be available opening day? Like, how does that sort of impact the position player group? Like, do you want to just like give a little more runway to some of these younger guys? How much, if Wrigley played a little more normal, like what would Patrick Wisdom's season look like? Maybe we wouldn't have even been having this conversation. And, at the same time, Talkman's had some huge moments for the Cubs. I think he's a real like grown up in the room and a nice player. Classic, gives you a good at bat, can play multiple outfield positions. However, it felt like the last 2 months of the year, like, did he even really play? You know what I mean? Like, they kind of rolled. And then kind of looming over this as well, the position player group is Cody Bellinger's opt-in or opt-out decision, which, to be honest, we have not gotten like total clarity one way or the other. I think there have been kind of valid points made for either decision. We've gotten mixed signals, right? Of like, not
especially lately.
Exactly. So
yeah, it's and this, things can get murky as decisions are about to be made, right?
Right.
And we can hear varying opinions, varying thoughts, but we definitely, I think, a week ago or 10 days ago, if you asked Patrick and I, we were in agreement, like he's opting out, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a little hesitation there now. I've gotten some information that suggests that maybe that's not as certain as it once was. I think you've gotten similar feedback. I don't know. I don't think it's as much of a slam dunk as we felt it was. These things change and things evolve. And I think that's part of the message I got. Like, he may opt in. These things change. Like, that was, but who knows? These things change. Like, that's kind of the summation of the information I got. It's like some people think he may opt in now, but also that's not a slam dunk. I don't feel certain either way now. I'm definitely hedging on that a little bit. When it comes to some of these names, my thing about Patrick Wisdom is I think he takes too much heat from fans, right?
No doubt.
I think he takes too much heat from fans because he's a part-time player that needs to be used in very specific situations. I think a big part of why fans disliked it is because a lot of times Craig Counsell was pinch hitting Michael Busch, sitting Michael Busch in favor of Patrick Wisdom against a lefty. We could debate that. I'm not sure. I think Wisdom has a role, and he was deployed as best as for his skill set. I just wonder, is $3 million for a guy whose best skill set is power and only real? I mean, that's he hits the crap out of the ball.
That's
right?
his calling card, yeah.
But is that where you want to allocate those funds? They're not the Mets. They're not the Dodgers. I remember someone telling me the Mets can just, outbid when the Mets were in that outbidding offseason, and it was just like random reliever, like I think it was Brooks Raley. It's like teams were interested in Brooks Raley, and they're like, we can't sign Brooks Raley. They're offering him like $5 million more than we'd even think about. Like it's things like that. So they're not that team. So they $3 million matters to them. Is there someone that they can get? Like, here are the two things I was thinking. Is there someone they can get that value from in the minors that they see, right-handed, just pure slug?
Yeah.
Or is their goal this offseason to find an everyday slugger that makes Wisdom a little less valuable? With Tauchman, I think it's a different discussion. He's so you talked about it when you talked about him barely playing, but he showed how valuable he was when barely playing. He could handle that.
No doubt.
He can be that step in for a month and a half because your starting center fielder, right fielder, whatever outfielder got injured, and be productive. Or he can be that guy that barely plays and give you a quality at bat. I think that's valuable. The problem is Kevin Alcantara, Owen Casey, potential free agent, potential trade guy. Like, all of those guys are going to fit that they want to get someone in there that's an outfielder / DH, right? In all likelihood, that's a fit. That's the easiest way to upgrade this offense, outside of catcher. So I wonder, he's too valuable to just non-tender, in my opinion. But is he a fit for this team when you have young guys? So I think maybe he's a tender candidate that you look to trade. I think Alzolai's the interesting one. Do you want him rehabbing for $2.3 million? He's not, in all likelihood, Counsell wouldn't give us an answer if he's out for next year just yet. That was when he just had the surgery. He didn't want to give timelines. I think Nick Madrigal may be done with the Cubs. I don't know if I'm being too hard.
There's no reason to bring him back.
I don't see it. Unless you think you wouldn't want him to be the guy stepping in for Nico. I don't see it.
That's what Matt Shaw is for. That's what James Shaw does for. Feels like that ship has sailed in my mind.
Yeah. No, I think I just think these are interesting decisions in the sense that they are names, right? That we've seen play over the past 2-3 years, and it may be time to who are the guys you keep? Who are the guys, Julian Merriweather's an interesting one. Always hurt. Is $1.3 million the market value for him because of his upside? Or is that and I think it'll also tell us a little bit about how much are they counting every million, every 100,000? Is 1.3 million too much for Julian Merriweather? Okay, what are they doing here? Is that because they are worried about his upside and his health? He didn't flash enough when he was out there. That's what kind of goes through my head. Nate Pearson, obvious, right? You're
no doubt.
But the rest of these, I think the relievers and some of these names that we've just seen play a lot over the past 2-3 years are the ones that I look at. And then I agree with you on Bellinger. I think it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. These next, we'll know by the next time we record a podcast. I believe we'll know what's happening, and I guess then we can really start talking about here's how we can ask Jed. We'll be at the GM meetings. Okay, this decision has been made. How do you attack this offseason? How much can you laser focus in on different things? I'm curious what their answer will be and how they're going to attack the offseason with or without Bellinger.
Yeah, it's got to be rare to look at one domino having such a big impact so early in the offseason, because in a lot of ways this roster is sort of set. You're talking about roughly $30 million, if you are calculating these sort of non-tender decisions, and maybe he is that sort of everyday guy. You can just run it back for another year with him. One other thing to your point of you could trade a Tauchman, or you can essentially cut these guys for a fraction of the price by a certain date in spring training. You can look it up in the CBA. But it's not a fully guaranteed tender in November. But yeah, certainly those things add up. I am curious to hear kind of how Jed spins it. I think he'd be sort of fine either way. I think they'd obviously like flexibility. So getting that money back would, I think, probably be appealing. But look, Bellinger's a good player. He fits this team still really, really well. And he is someone who has that MVP capability. There aren't that many guys just out there who you could say, like, yeah, like if everything breaks right, he might be a top 5 MVP candidate next year. That's just kind of where he plays, what he does, how he kind of fits for this particular group.
Yeah, I think it's easy to just look at last season and say he's not worth that money, and forget about what he did the year before, or also say like the Wrigley stuff is an excuse. I don't think it's an excuse. I think it's a reality, right? And it's just like it has to be factored in. I'm very curious to see how, like, not just how it plays out, but like the reaction by fans, and then like how good he can be next year if he comes back, because I think there's a chance that he could put together an even better season, because I think a lot of what happened at Wrigley was a bit of randomness. And if he can play like even close to how he played on the road at home, you're talking about a pretty dang good season, and someone that likely then opts out of a final. It would be a final third year, and then hits free agency at what, 30? Is that right? Would he be 30 then?
Roughly, yeah. And his salary would go down significantly in that last year as a front loaded too. So it's kind of a no-brainer.
Right.
At that point.
All right, Patrick, we're going to talk more about Cody Bellinger in the weeks to come. At minimum, next episode will be likely a Cody Bellinger heavy episode. So we'll touch base on Cody Bellinger again and figure out how this decision plays out. Let's take a quick break and wrap this podcast up. All right, Patrick. As we saw, the Yankees lost the World Series, and with that, one of the best players in baseball will be entering free agency. Juan Soto will be a free agent officially on 5 days after the World Series ends. So that's Monday when I believe, if I'm doing my math right, I'm probably not.
What are you thinking? Like whatever, talk to all 30 teams and not just whatever the technicality is. Yeah.
He didn't go full Garrett Cole. I don't think he had a Boris Corp hat on while doing his post-game interviews. But he was pretty open, and I appreciate that. I think the whole I want to do anything to come back to the Yankees. This is where I belong. Like, unless you sign an extension right there, I think that rings pretty hollow. And he said what he said, and I think it's important and to be honest. And he was just like, he's going to listen to everyone. And I think a lot of different outlets, ESPN, us at The Athletic, various different outlets are putting out predictions, but it seems like New York, and then LA as like a sleeper, right? Dodgers as like a sleeper, but that's what everyone's talking about, right? The Cubs are barely mentioned.
Yeah, I don't think the Cubs are spending a lot of time on like a Juan Soto recruiting video. Maybe I'm wrong, and they've totally misled us over the last 6-7 years. But yeah, for The Athletic, it was grouped in different tiers, and essentially have half the league that's just like no chance at all, and that might even be conservative estimate. I think the Dodgers made me think of something. I think it was Theo had observed kind of coming out of the John Lester negotiations of, even at that time, the Dodgers just had so much money and like so much sort of cachet and ambition that they had this ability to quick strike at any point. Like, they didn't think Lester wanted to go to the Dodgers. Obviously he wanted to come to Chicago, but they felt, the Giants put on a full court press. The Red Sox sort of was lurking around there. And then it was like, the Dodgers are just not really knowing exactly what Lester wanted at that point and what the Dodgers wanted, but that they just had this ability where they could, like, at any point just sort of jump in. And we're talking, almost a decade later, almost a full decade later. And it's kind of the same thing where, like, do you think they'll sign Soto? Like, probably not the favorites, but, like, should the Yankees and Mets be worried about it? No doubt.
Yeah.
Look, trading for Mookie Betts and signing that monster extension in the middle of a pandemic, like, did people think Freddie Freeman was going to wind up at Dodger Stadium? Dodgers certainly favorite for Ohtani, but did anyone think that contract structure would be the ultimate form of that deal? Like, no chance. So it will be fascinating. I'd imagine this is not something where things are going to crater for Mr. Soto or Mr. Boris, that they'll probably be pushing towards one of those winter meetings types deals where if they, kind of get what they want and get the big press conference at the winter meetings. But I know you've been asking around about Soto for a while now, and I don't know, you're not very optimistic about that pursuit in Chicago, are you?
I think you said it, like, unless we've been misled for years now, it's just not it's not that the Cubs aren't in a place to do it. Like, I think it makes all the sense in the world. I just don't think it's the way the Ricketts operate. And when I say that, it's not like Ricketts won't give Jed the money to do that. It's what Jed knows will happen when he uses that money. Like, that now it's like they don't bump it up all of a sudden and now they have $270 million to spend. It just really, like, listen to the way Carter and Jed talk, and they talk about financial flexibility. They would lose a lot of flexibility if they saw. And listen, if you want to push back and say, who cares about that? Or, like, maybe sign fewer Trey Mancinis and Tucker Barnharts over the next, 5 years, 10 years, 13 years. If that's the pushback, I'm not going to argue with that. I think he's worth it. I think he's worth the lack of financial flexibility. This is not me saying this is the right strategy. I think signing Juan Soto would be the right move for the Cubs. It's just not the way they've done things. And we're not getting any indication that they're suddenly changing strategy. I think what I will say as far as the free agency is, it's pretty cool that we get, like, this insane once in a generation talent of Shohei Ohtani one offseason, and then the next offseason it's like Ted Williams clone is at age 26 is a free agent. Like, that's crazy. Like, it's very rare that we see this. And for me, that's where I start to feel bad for the fans, where it was never really realistic. There were some tiny inklings and like tiny moments where it's like, are the Cubs actually going to put in a big bid for Shohei? I'm not sure if we'll even get that with Soto this winter. But we could be off. They could be lurking somehow, and we totally misread this and got bad signals or were misled. I don't think that's the case. And
so you're saying there's a chance.
And it's kind of like ultimately it's a bummer, right? Like, these two generational talents, and the Cubs aren't there on them. They'll have to make different moves to excite the fan base, obviously, but Soto, it's going to be fun to watch. And again, like we talked about this briefly, whatever the Mets do, like, it feels like they're about to become like this powerhouse, this obnoxious powerhouse when it comes to free agency and stuff like that. Between them and the Dodgers, like, the Cubs are going to, like, it's going to be frustrating, I think, for Cubs fans to watch these types of things where they're just like, throwing their weight around, and fans are going to be like, why can't the Cubs do that? And I honestly, I feel for Cubs fans when it hasn't happened yet. So I guess we'll see what exactly happens, but that's what it feels like is about to happen with the Mets for the next few years, if not the foreseeable future.
No doubt. And I mean, if the Mets want Soto, they're going to take this way beyond anywhere the Cubs are comfortable. I do think they were legit on Ohtani. He made it clear, though, where he wanted to play. And the Cubs, I think, were just not in a place where they could credibly say, oh, yeah, well, we're going to be competing for the World Series the entire length of your contract. And really, to me, it's not even as much the salary on an annual basis. It's just if he's going to be getting a contract that's almost like double the length of Jason Hayward's contract, like that is not going to make Cubs executives very comfortable. I think that is a hard sell internally and not a totally unreasonable position. I know Soto is extremely young, and that's just kind of where this is going. But in terms of like selling it to your bosses, if you're Jed Hoyer, or signing off on it if you're ownership, like if you're thinking about writing off just like maybe 5-6 years of a deal, and if your primary goal is sustainability and being competitive every single year, and that you're explicitly not trying to go all in for one season, then yeah, there's just too many suitors. There's too much hesitation. Just do not see it happening. Yeah. But I guess we've been wrong before is the hopeful line. But we'll see. It'll be fun to watch the Boris show in action.
Oh yeah.
Weekend. Next week, always some good metaphors and some lines that make you sort of groan or roll your eyes as well. Always entertaining.
Yeah. I've grown to enjoy it in the sense like I look forward to rolling my eyes. Oh dear, here we go again. And not like I'm not angry about it. It's just like get a good chuckle from it. Take it all in, for what it's worth, and enjoy the 20 minutes or so where we all gather around and listen to the puns, whatever he comes up with. All right, Patrick, we'll be back at it from the GM meetings. We'll both be there. We'll record at least one of these podcasts, probably from San Antonio, hopefully after we've talked to Jed and we have some sense of what Cody Bellinger is doing, and that will obviously be important. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. This is Northside Territory. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Subscribe to The Athletic, where Patrick and I will be on top of all things Cubs this winter. Thanks for listening, everyone. Take care.